Is there such a thing as too much luck? Is there such a thing as too much fun? Messing around, wondering how it's taken so long. I'm really so strong. It's not too
Happy
much
Monday. Welcome to another fun week at Too Much. And here at Too Much, we're all about finding new pathways to live a more fulfilling life. And the times we live in demand more community. I think that has been just a anthem I see across social media around how do we build our community? How do we create more mutual aid? And so I think it's essential to how we weather the current time we live in. And so I wanted to bring in one of my favorite community builders. So I have Michael Farber here today. Welcome.
Great to see you.
And Michael Farber is the co-founder and CEO of Breakout, which creates immersive place-based experiences that connect people, communities, and purpose. Since 2014, Breakout has engaged more than 2,000 leaders across 45 plus cities, investing over $3 million into local ecosystems, partnering with leading foundations, and producing award-winning short films. In 2017, he co-founded the Breakout Foundation, which has provided over $415,000 in grants to 120 plus community leaders, me being one of them, and advised on millions more in philanthropic investments. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, great to see you. Always fun to chop it up. I love the fact that this could go in so many different directions.
I know it's so fun, right? You don't know where I'm going to take you.
Yeah.
I love Breakout. I'm an OG Breakout community member. And having been an entrepreneur that, dabbled in a few of these different types of communities where supposedly there's some sort of a mission or there's some sort of thing that keeps us together. The reality is I have found that most of them don't live by the values they purport to. And there hasn't been that glue that I think has cultivated community for the long term. And I think Breakout is the only one that I feel that has done that extremely well.
I mean, look, I think most people hearing this probably start to roll their eyes the second they hear community because it's like such an overused buzzword, but at the same time, the core meaning to it and what it is, of course, is so beneficial to so many people's lives. And, community is been a lot of things to a lot of people. I think where I have seen community be tricky, or at least what people are purporting it to be, is you sometimes wonder where you see people building something, how much of this is it that they're trying to do what they say they do versus them being at the forefront and on the mic and
Right.
on stage. And the reality is to build things like this, even if you don't want to be at the forefront, there is a certain amount that you do have to be, right? You are the person people are listening to, leading to. But within that, a lot of people do start to believe their own bullshit to a really high degree. And there is a decent amount of messiah complexes out into what they're building, as opposed to taking a step back and like, why did I start this to begin with? Because there are so many great needs and niches and things that people want to do to feel fulfilled. And of course, as you kind of said in the intro, now more than ever. But the realities behind the scenes of building a community, it is a lot of hard work. It's not a simple economic model of sustainability. And I think sometimes people take the easy way out, which serves them, but doesn't necessarily serve the mission.
So how do you define community for yourself or for Breakout?
I think for us, the big thing has been, and look, I love my people. I love the people who come, but I'm somewhat introverted at times myself. I'm not someone naturally who just wants to be out and about. I need my recharge time. But once again, I love creating experiences and I love bringing people together that are trying to build things that are consequential to society and in the places that we live in. And so to me, I always feel good in the sense that, and for most people who've been to a breakout experience, it's not like I'm like front and center and many times people have told me I should be more front and center. It's actually would help our growth. And in some ways that maybe is true, but we've really always made the people who stand out the most in our programming be the people that we are showcasing and in community with. And I think that's been something that really resonates to the people who attend. In many ways, we are the organizers and we're making a lot of these moving pieces work. But I think the people who come know, yeah, they get along with us. Some of them might be really close friends with us, but they know that they're going to do some fun things. They're going to see things that they wouldn't have access to. They're going to come back to where they're from feeling inspired. They're going to want to make some new connections. And I think that is the part of the community. It's not just like, so for instance, there's like entrepreneurial communities, and we did some of this in the early days, which are all about like intimate small groups to talk about your entrepreneurial challenges. By the way, that's really important, especially for founders, and people need that time. What can happen though with that, and usually what that is it's more of a like, how can you help me,
Right.
right? I think the people who attend Breakout, they oftentimes inherently aren't getting something that's directly monetarily going to impact them, which kind of goes in the face of what most events are. You usually buy a ticket event to try to make more money or to build your brand. Now, I think some people have had some consequences that have helped them move along that. But the people who are coming to a breakout experience, I think they're coming because they believe that there's another path forward, there's another way for people to build the things that they're doing, and they want to be around people, even if they don't agree with everything that they believe in, are trying to do that in their own way. And I think there is a bit, as much as we all have to be somewhat selfish in building what we're building, I do think the people who show up to Breakout really do take a step back to listen first. And I think that's a very rare thing to do at a gathering.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't sort of how Breakout breaks down, essentially they have chosen a city across the United States that how many entrepreneurs and different types of executives come
On
usually?
average, like 100 to 150.
Yeah, so 100 people come in over the course of 3 or 4 days. You get a deep look into what makes that city tick from a community standpoint, from a impact standpoint, from an entrepreneurial innovation standpoint, social justice standpoint, and then you get to meet founders and people that are building in there. So for me, it's educational, it's curiosity, but I'm also with 150 people who care about the same stuff I care about. And we're all looking at problems from a lens of wanting to not just build something for ourselves, but to make the world a better place. And that for me has always been what's been so much more compelling, is that I feel like I'm around people that care about this moral crisis we're living in. Like, how do we actually make the world a better place? How do we invest in our local community? How do we understand local governance versus national governance? There was a lot of things that were very foreign to me coming from more of a arts entertainment background that I think helped me understand how important grassroots organization was, or local policy, all these things that I just didn't understand how much that made a difference in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah, 100%. Someone said at one of our events at one point that Breakout's kind of like adult camp for people who give a shit.
Yeah.
And I think in the most simple way, that's right. It's a place to play, discover, be inspired. Yes, we have structure within some of the programming, but you're still an adult in the way you move around, and everything you just said. We have deeply passionate people, and they know what they know, but there's also, they get the fact that there's a lot that they don't know. And when you break people out of their typical kind of sector focus and have the opportunity to meet people that you pretty much would never meet otherwise, it's a really refreshing thing, especially in the sense that like most of the pockets we run in, not by our own fault, but are hyper segregated, whether it's the class background we grew up in or the racial ethnic group we grew up in or whatever it is. But we're all on these paths, and, to meet people from all different walks of life is rare, and it's taken us a lot of time and work to do that. It wasn't even what we thought we were doing it to begin with. It was more of a sectoral approach, but we just found that people were like, wow, especially with all this dividing lines across society. And, social media, obviously, as we all know, is a dumpster fire. But to meet in person and to actually be able to have full conversations around how we see things and trying to understand. I mean, I remember we had an event way back, but one of our community members who had spent a significant time in prison was talking to a policy person at a large tech company. And, they were talking about some of their hiring policies. And they didn't know who each other were before they were sat next to one another and talking. But, they each walked away with this like kind of changed mind about how they saw things because of that opportunity. And so for us, that is key.
What initially drew you to building this?
I was an early team member of a real estate media and events business, and we had a lot of growth. I led the national events growth, and I joined it in '09. When the economy was crashing. I'd been in commercial real estate before that. And I wasn't the founder of that company. And so, I wanted to control my own destiny a bit. I also found myself being like the kid in the back of the classroom who was like talking shit, but like wasn't going up to the front of the classroom and saying like how they really felt. And I felt like
Yeah.
there was like a few event products out there in communities that I just thought were like hyper inauthentic,
Mm.
that I was pretty adjacent to. And I was like, at a certain point, I'm like, okay, well, I'm talking on the shit about them, like, like not like on like social or anything, but with joking with friends. And I'm like, well, what am I doing? I'm still inside of this entity. If what better way to use this energy than like an actual positive way than just being like nitpicky about that and frustrated about my situation working for someone else. And so I said, I'm 29, turning 30. If there was ever a time to basically start my career all over again, it is now. And, I took like 6 months while still at that business, like, bringing people together. And I've always been kind of a chameleon personality in like the spaces I walk in and my interests. And I think pretty quickly people really appreciated the rooms I was putting together. And the only thing I knew was to throw a first event and just get going. And kind of the rest is history.
I love that. I think it's good for people to know also because I know for you, Breakout has evolved a lot, and you've allowed it to tell you what it is versus you telling it what it is. And so it's helpful to say, okay, I don't know exactly where I'm going or what I want this to be, but I do know that I'm going to start and I have this intention. And then you can tell us more, but I'm sure those intentions clarified and deepened with every event.
Yeah, totally. I mean, right. In the beginning, I knew, as I said, that it was going to be this leadership community. The kind of more purposeful programming was something that we fell into by accident. Our second event in New Orleans, one of our attendees that signed up at the last second worked for Dan Gilbert in Detroit. They came, they were like, this is incredible. They're like, would you ever come to Detroit? I mean, I'd been following the news, but all I saw was like, outside of like, I think Obama had maybe just gone to the Shinola tour, but everything was like 50,000 abandoned homes, people not being able to pay for their water bills, biggest, bankruptcy in American history. And I said, screw it. Like we're on this adventure to learn from unique stories and to, do things that kind of change perceptions. Like, why not go? And like that trip was very formative and, how we started to do things. But of course, as you said, like every event has had its piece that's constantly focused us in. And I would say that even around this journey, I mean, the fact that we started in this in 14, Trump wins in 16, that I've never wanted this to be a political organization, nor is it a political organization, but we certainly know that people have strong feelings, people lean a certain way, there's all these existential things happening. I think at different times we've leaned in, leaned out a little bit on like how to deal with that. But I would say like I've always felt at the end of the day that we are conveners first, and we are creating containers for people to build these relationships. And the more, time has gone on, the more there have been other fractures around like what those, conversations can be. But if we are inviting the right people who have good faith that everyone in the room has something to bring, even if they don't agree with them at every point, then this time is worthwhile. And this isn't me trying to say like we need to have Bernies and AOCs and MAGAs and everything kumbayaing. Like that's not what we're trying to do here. We're just trying to bring in together people who are tangibly trying to build things. I don't care necessarily about their political leaning.
Yeah.
It probably leans a certain way, but at the end of the day, we want builders and doers to be participating.
If we're talking about the world we're trying to build, these new pathways we're trying to build into, I think we have to build bridges. I think we have to hold space for uncomfortable conversation. I don't have to
Yep.
necessarily agree with you, but to not have this level of attacking or yelling. I don't have to agree with your opinion, but I can also listen to it, and we can have
Yeah.
discourse about it. And I find that's harder and harder to do with social media and how people choose to engage. You're so much kinder to people when you're in front of them. But people don't want to have those conversations in person anymore because they feel uncomfortable or they feel vulnerable. And so they resort to having those conversations behind their screen. That's part of why we're seeing more and more of a fracture. That's why I think Breakout is important, because it's like you come in with a lens of curiosity. That's one of the values. You have been very thoughtful about how you hold those boundaries, I think, because we've had some different circumstances or experiences where things have crossed lines or felt like, okay, maybe that's a step too far. And how do we address someone when they're, maybe spewing more hate than productive discourse? And it's a hard space to hold and
Yeah.
hold well.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely at a certain point in time started instituting at every one of our events, kind of norm setting from the beginning, just to like set the room. And, having people on our team who are those kind of like facilitators who know how to, you know, just reorient things and remind things. And it's nice having like third party people, quite frankly, that are community people, but like leading that. I think the community appreciates it, and there's no perfect moment with it, but it's so funny. There are a few of I mean, look, there's some people who attend our stuff who I would just say are more fiery online, and I probably agree with a lot of it, but that is like their online persona for the things they are fighting for. And then I find that they come to our event and it's kind of like, ah,
Yeah.
and they're like there to like just be like, I just need like to take a deep breath and like touch grass and just like be inspired and hear some new ideas. And that also like makes me happy. Like I appreciate the fact that they recognize that like regardless of like the fight that they're in, and in many most what cases it's something I definitely agree with. Like it doesn't mean we can't call it, don't need to call it bullshit, but we can't run like that at all times. And to your point, these things aren't productive. And once again, I mean, especially like the past few years, right? I mean, whether it was COVID and vaccines or Israel Palestine, there have been these bigger fractured moments. And I have my personal opinions on how I feel about these things. There's been many times where people have asked me, are you going to make specific commentary, especially not shockingly on the latter? And I chatted with a lot of people. I was going back and forth. And at a certain point in time, and there's people who work with me who are very loud on their personal socials. And that's totally fine to me. People should be able to say what they want to say, and everyone's got their views. But from an organizational standpoint, we are a place to gather and to inspire.
Mm.
And, it's not, we've realized it's not really our place as an organization, because once again, we aren't a political organization.
Yeah.
We are an organization that's based here in the US, focusing primarily on American cities and the ideas and the innovation and the arts and culture that gathers and creates healthier, happier, more successful, equitable communities. And so anything that we can do to advance that, we are all in. Anything else is just not in our focus area, and it never has been. And that's despite strong personal feelings I have as Michael Farber.
This is very interesting to me because I feel like a lot of people in organizations or leaders of organizations or employees of organizations feel now every company should take a political stance, or putting our dollars or spending our dollars towards our politics. And because you have this space of diversity and different ideas, do you ever feel like, how do you feel staying neutral or being like, this is not my place? Or maybe you're feeling very personally passionate about something, and then you have to take a step back and say, okay, well, I know I feel that way, but this is separate from this. How do you work that out? Because I'm sure there's times where you're just like, we should make this statement.
I guess like our entire business for the most part is an IRL business. It's an
Right.
in-person business that the whole point is you're going to spend time for multiple days with one another, and you're going to get more layers of the onion and more context, and like really give things the level to breathe. And social media does not allow that. So we know that people's attention span is usually only a few seconds. So that means, is my statement the statement I would want to make, which then no one's going to really read, which usually is my feelings that have a lot to say and a lot of things I want to say. But then if the whole point, well, it's only social media, if you're going to do this, you need people to make sure they read it. So then you squeeze it down into one small sentence.
Yeah.
And then, it gets forwarded around in one way or the other. Also, I'm the type of person, like, and I hope we all are, or many of us are. It's not like from day to day, every single day, I don't change my mind, or I don't have evolutions on my point, or there are new data to change it. I'm not trying to be set in stone. And I just think the more I kind of thought about some of those things, it's like, look, I think if you follow what we do and you see the programs we've created for years and the grants we give and the films we do, I think you have a pretty clear understanding of like where our North Star is and what we care about. If that's not enough to make you understand what we do, then you're just not paying attention.
That's the right answer. For me, at least, it resonates with me because I'm always like, my work speaks for itself. I don't have to prove to you or get loud on social media. And obviously I'm loud about some things, but I think my issue with social media is because of this attention span problem, is every little thing is under such scrutiny. Like, you like a post in passing, you didn't pay that much attention. Someone's like, why'd you like that post? And you're like, I just don't have the bandwidth to do that. Like, I know, you know who I am, or if you don't, you can take a look at the of and decide. And, maybe in 10 years, we'll have a study where it says that social media, the level of political noise made this impact. But so far, that's not what's happened. We haven't said
No.
this impact has happened as a direct result of you posting this thing. We're trying to figure out in this time, what is the most effective form of protesting today? And I don't know if we have the answer just yet, but I don't think as of today, social media is it. And maybe I'll be wrong in 10 years. But that's sort of how I feel about it too, where I'm like, I don't think this has to be a thing where we're constantly just virtue signaling or saying this thing to appease the mass of people on the internet. I think we have to live it, whatever our values are in our day-to-day lives, and create that impact IRL. And then in your gatherings, in my digital work, whatever it is, I don't think that post is going to make a bigger difference than what I do or you do daily.
No, this is entertainment. And by the way, I love entertainment. And I consume a lot of it. And I like to laugh, or I like to, even if I don't do anything with it, I just like them. If it's people I enjoy, I like hearing how they describe things. I mean, there's all these different things. But, someone we know in Chicago who leads a nonprofit that their whole mission is ending life without parole for juveniles. He did 13 years on a 20 some year sentence. A lot of the people they've worked with were sentenced as juveniles. They have no online presence for the most part. They're not but yet his team is at city halls it's not city halls, sorry, like state capitol buildings, constantly meeting and changing laws, getting real work done. Like, they are doing the work that you have to do. And not shockingly, they're not, I mean, look, it's nice to have a social amount, and they probably should have more social, quite frankly. But I only use them as an example, and maybe it's a little bit extreme in the sense of most of the work is done in person and behind closed doors, and it's done without big talk. It's just done with action. So to me, we all have our time or our things that we like to listen to when we're taking a walk, we're exercising, we're driving. Once again, I do a lot of it. I love listening to things, but it's still entertainment. Someone still has to, after they do that, has to plug in. And for most people, that's not going to be their thing because they have their own 9 to 5. They have to put food on the table. They have their families, what have you. And they just want to be voyeurs to the process. And that's totally okay. But let's not mistake that for activism because you've liked a few things.
It's so funny. You're the second person in 48 hours to refer to social media as entertainment. and it's how we have to think of it. A lot of it is junk food. It's quick. You're not getting the full story. You're not
Hmm.
getting the full context. It's changed a lot from the format where it started as a means to share our lives with other people, and now it's turned into this whole business, and there's a whole bunch, 8,000 different levers and motivations behind what it is today. I participate in the fact that it's a brand tool, but I'm realizing more and more I'm finding my joy and fulfillment in just pulling back a little bit and being a little bit more counterculture. I'm interested in slowness now, which is crazy for me to say because I was the Energizer Bunny and never thought I would ever in the history of my life say that I'm interested in slowness. But here I am because it is the counter effect to what is happening, that I want to slow down. I want to take time. I want to sit with people. I want to be present. I don't want to miss anything.
Yeah, I think that's right. I just also think a lot. I look, I love Twitter mainly in the sense of like I follow it a lot for sports, but
You mean
there's certain other
X?
like niche things. I'll never call it that. I can't. And guess what? Every time your algorithm starts becoming really insane and it's fight stuff, you just mute them all, and then you kind of gets back to your thing. But there was a point last year where I was like, I got to get off this, and I went off for a few months, and I remember I popped back on, and some of the stupid VC battles I would just like randomly follow. I was like, they came back on. I was like, oh God, I'm so glad I missed out on this weird world that the people on it think is so important. But for the
Mhm.
most part, no one knows at all about any of this. And I just think everyone like vastly overstates their importance on this stuff. It doesn't mean that these people can't make a lot of money themselves. It doesn't mean that they can't sell a lot of products. It doesn't mean that for some people it can't bring a lot of laughs or joy or contentment in time. But, you know, the Dems trying to find their Joe Rogan of the left is just the worst headline of 2025, and I just want it to go away.
I don't think when we die, we're going to be like, man, I wish I spent more time on social media. I don't think that's going to be our takeaway. It'll be quite the opposite. So that's where I'm trying to focus my energy. I have a couple questions. So because
Sure.
you've done so much, you've had so much education around cities and local policy. America's so big. It's such a diverse,
Mhm.
big place with so many subcultures and pockets. What has been the most interesting thing you've learned?
Gosh, the thing, and I'll just say it, whatever. It's not the most interesting thing, but everyone thinks they're a lot more special and unique than they are, which is a shitty thing for me to say. But like, everyone's so convinced of how particularly different and unique things they're doing. And of course, there's cultural differences. But most of the issues and like gatekeeping that happens to power and money and all these different things, it's the same from place to place to place to place.
Mm,
It's kind of no different, In most of the cities, especially ones that aren't like the huge ones, there's a small group of people who are in all the leadership roles and they're at all the different functions and they serve on a lot of the different boards. And it's a bit of a game of, specifically people who are involved in the city, I should say. There's always going to be people who have no, whether they're public or private. There's always a certain amount of private industry people who just keep to themselves. But like for people who are playing, whether public or private, in the public realm of that city, it's a very, very small group of people who are swimming in kind of all these circles. And it's kind of the same general challenges. And I would say most are not, there's like so many passionate people, but the problem always is there is a bit of a lack of innovation and imagination. And part of it is there's more Game of Thrones to secure the positions they are in than
mm,
to advance the things they should be doing. And the reality is, in a lot of these places, the people who get to these positions are as good of a position as they're going to get and as best of a compensation as they're going to get. So then I think they just hold on to dear life. And I think most of them come in with the right hopes and
right.
dreams, but I do think there is this it just over time just erodes a little bit. And I think that is a tough thing. I would also say, and I will say some positive things here in a second, but I would say another thing that I tell some of the cities we're in, I was like, you all think you're playing musical chairs with, some of the other cities, but a lot of the best talent, or a lot of really good mobile talent that you're trying to compete with, they're going to Mexico City, they're going to Bogota, they're going to Lisbon, they're going to other places. They're not thinking about, do I go to Columbus, Ohio, or to wherever, Oklahoma City or wherever
Mhm.
else. And so I think in this world, especially increasingly with like affordability crises, obviously I'm in New York, here in LA, like we're two of the worst, but
Yeah.
every city you go to, young talent will tell you the city's too expensive. It's a
Yeah.
pretty across the board issue. And, I was with someone yesterday who has a team in, like, I think Lima, Peru. And he was saying that for 200,000, like whatever this like role is that they hire for here in the US, $200,000, they can pay someone $50,000 in Lima. So they can have four people, but those people actually live still pretty well. Like, it's not
Yeah.
like they're just like underpaying them. It's like their cost
Yeah.
of lifestyle is totally different. And so I do think these are these big wedge issues that are continuously a thing. But on the positive side, if you are a young entrepreneur, a young creator, someone that's just, I don't know. I think we sometimes have to take a step back and be like, how much do we actually need in life to be happy, right? Of course, social media would tell us you got to have a bag and all this dumb shit. But like, what is it that you really, really need, right? And I
Yeah.
would say some of the people that I've seen that are some of the happiest,
Mhm.
and like I'm almost like some of the envious, are some of the small business owners that I've seen in a bunch of
100%.
the like quote unquote second and third tier cities across the country, because their floor to start is so much lower, and they're able to create something that is way more comfortable even if their ceiling isn't that high. And at the end of the day, I think that's what we want. We want to be happy and fulfilled, and to your point, be able to slow down at some point. And I think, where can we do that best? And I think there are a lot more options, and I would say a lot of the places I've gone to, I think, really do give that opportunity.
What you're saying is super important. One of the big exercises I did for myself last year was ask myself, what is enough? And I sort of forced myself to get really clear on what enough would be for me and where would I feel content. And I came to an answer that I'm not there yet, but I'm not far off. And it was really helpful, instead of just striving. What is enough for me to feel like I'm living my fullest life, that I feel happy in the work that I'm doing, that I feel financially comfortable, not stressed. And it takes a deep amount of honesty and introspection. And you sort of have to parse through, like, do I really want that big house? Is that really interesting to me? Do I really care about that? And I had to work through my own level of ego and ask those questions. And the people that are continually the happiest are the people that have done that exercise and said, this is enough. And the people that are
Hmm.
constantly striving for more, they will never have enough because they haven't asked themselves what it is.
Totally. I could not agree. And it's something I feel like I theoretically had thought previously, but more to your point, in purpose, trying to actually write that out.
Well, I was sort of forced to. Sort of going through a
Uh,
big existential crisis and I had no choice, but that's
but
probably a
that's
better way to
okay.
do it.
Most of us are procrastinators to a certain point. There usually has to be some sort of moment that get us there. But of course, like wherever we can get more ahead of that, that is important. Look, but I came across this one of these stupid Instagram, whatever. It's one of these guys who he's like, I asked billionaires, how do you get here, whatever. But anyway, this one guy was like, I guess he was like, how he made all this money. He was like, you got to be in the money business to make more money. And I guess he had done something in like finance or something. And I was like, it's kind of a douchey statement, but also like not
Accurate.
wrong. And if you do, if by the way, you do feel like you're like, there are people we know who like their whole lives, they did want the big house and some of those things. And actually that has brought them some amount of satisfaction. Well, you do have to work, you have to put yourself in a lane of like, this is the industry, the only industries that possibly can get me there. So I have to be head down. I can't just magically think that being a like out of, yeah, sure, a few writers end up selling big movies and things or whatever and make a ton of money. But for the most part, there are certain sectors that just don't pay well.
Yeah.
And so if that is where your heart is, then you do have to like reimagine a little bit like what is logical.
Creative chasm. Like once you cross it, you're making a lot of money, but until you cross it, it's hard. And so
Right.
you really have to have thinks about like all these people are talented. There's no rhyme or reason as to why one person succeeds over another, truly. A lot of it is luck. There's so much talent that exists in this world. I'm constantly blown away. And so a lot of it's just like timing, luck, and the right opportunity, the right person at the right. It's really hard to figure out. But if you're like having a big house is my ultimate goal, then yeah, you should go into finance if you want that. If you do a creative path, there's not saying you won't get that. Your path just might look a little more like a zigzag.
Totally. Look, if you want that country club life and the big house and the G Wagon and all the things, like there are specific industries that will get you there faster. If you're like, I just want a small 3 bedroom, 2 bath house, but like, in a neighborhood that at least has some good public schools and whatever, like, and it doesn't have to be like the craziest place ever, like you can figure out how to maneuver that. Like,
Yeah.
you can start working a goal and saving and figuring out how to get you there. So I just, most of our stresses come down to money and like where we are and like what we can do and where we stand up, especially because there's such a comparison game. You used to just be at like family and friend gatherings. Now it's put in our face every two
Yeah.
seconds. And I think just being able to, instead of drowning in it, just taking a step back and being like, okay, well, that's cool, but like, I don't want to be that person. Like, Elon Musk is the richest person in the world. He's also like the biggest incel in the world. Like, so I
Yeah.
wouldn't want his life regardless of how rich he is. So,
Exactly.
it's good to just like remind ourselves of like what makes us unique, what makes us happy, and like the things that unlock that. And you have to be a bit purposeful with it.
You do. Because, yes, some material things you might really enjoy. And I love clothes. So I'm never going to discount that to a degree. But it's not ultimately what makes you happy. It can bring you some joy, but we have to think about the thresholds because there's like this immediate cortisol hit where it's exciting, but it's not the thing that creates durable happiness. And so happiness is an inner job. So that's what I always come back to. And so money makes your life easier. It does not make you happier.
Hmm. Agreed.
What has blown you away about the community of Breakout? What are things that have just rocked your mind?
There's a lot that's rocked my mind. You would think at this point, 10, 11 years in, that getting little text messages of people like together in some random place would have gotten old by now and it wouldn't have like the same impression. But people just are so genuinely happy to meet up with one another, to run into one another, to extend, introductions for one another. And I oftentimes have no idea who has actually remained friends, who even knows each other. Like it's literally like I'll come across something and someone will send me some like a note, and I'll be like, I didn't even know you knew each other. But like that just genuine openness and the fact that these relationships have been so long lasting. I mean, I see other things out there. I know other things that people go to, and not to say people haven't built long lasting relationships and other things. I know they have, but it's the number of people I know that have those friendships. Also, people who like when one time I barely spoke to them, and then I'll get like an email out of the blue, like of them introducing me to some like great person, and them saying like this is one of my favorite things I've ever been at, and like just putting it forward. Like I always say, we're absolutely like the little engine that could like so many times we've almost failed economically, and the amount that people have thought about the breakout community as like their own in many ways and wanted to keep putting it forward. But it's just like sometimes it's like goes without words, but I'm just like, wow, I cannot believe how much thought so many people have put into making sure that this keeps going. So yeah, that's been really special to me.
I think what people discount in sort of change making work, because we all want this like seismic shift, or we want this idea that, whatever, there's no more problems in our organization, right? Like these pipe dreams. It ultimately, it's like, it's all that small stuff that creates the change and compounds over time. And so I'm so happy that you're taking stock of those moments because that is it. Like ultimately, those seeds you planted reverberate. And then, as you've seen, people have gotten married at Breakout. People have, partnered. People have like been inspired to create different change in their city. And that is really the point: is that you can't know the depth of the impact you've created, but it exists, and it exists through those texts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Or just like random times people tag us and things. And I wish our support, like funding supporters, that would be something they would get more easily. Of course, they just, it's like give us tangible stuff. And like we have some of that stuff, but we have a far bigger impact that it cannot be tracked. And I am okay with that. It's just, of course, I'm also always keeping the lights on and
Yeah, it's
telling
stressful.
the story and pushing forward. So that part is stressful. But yeah, it's I always feel quite humbled hearing and seeing how people talk about us in the world. It's a very cool thing. And sometimes when we're in new cities or like new communities and people are kind of like they know nothing about us, they haven't read any. They also have spent zero time in researching us for a second, but
Yeah,
it's like
of course.
info to be found. And yeah, what I sometimes joke is I'm like, look, we've been doing events with people who are very opinionated who attend.
It's true.
And if
It's
we
true.
did,
Very loud
if
group.
very loud, opinionated people that if they felt like we were doing things out of step or like not, misappropriating or like not taking care of like community people we were working with or this or that, it would be very clear that that was the case. People would talk about it. People would share about it. Every single time we do something, it's a new opportunity for if things go wrong for people to tell people that. And so I think just the fact that we've been doing this for so long and we have so many people who like go to bat for us, so special. We're looking at going back potentially to Pittsburgh for next year. And over the past few years, we've made just like some incredible relationships. And I was talking to like the community manager of like a large tech company who was there. And I jumped on and I just assumed she wasn't going to know much. I started kind of doing my spiel and she was like, oh, I've heard about you from like X, Y, Z, ABC, like all these names who are like, and she was like, we love them. They're the best. They say you're like anything you're doing, like we have to get involved with. And these once again aren't when I first met them, they weren't like people who were like automatically feeling that way. Like they had to kind of come see it and feel it themselves. And it's a pretty cool feeling. But yeah, I know that's always my joke. I'm like, trust me, people would talk shit
They
if we
would.
messed
Yeah.
up.
People have feedback a lot. I think I've called you with feedback at one point.
Oh my god, people give feedback during the events, which sometimes I'm like, yo, I love you. Can we like talk about this like at least a few days after the event?
So, what do you think has been the most challenging part of building this? Has it been the continual funding? Has it been managing like community guardrails? Like, what has been the greatest challenge?
I mean, at the end of the day, we only make the model work with sponsorships. Our tickets aren't enough. We would have to charge 3 to 5K plus, or have some sort of like membership that was in the thousands to make the membership work. And then we have always had a sliding scale of our tickets, which are low thousands to mid 2000s. But like people go to business conferences and without a hotel pay thousands of dollars, and then
Yeah.
we give you 3 nights, all the food, all the things for like 1850. So all of our tickets, for what, not to say that like if they're not expensive, it's still a luxury product, but for what it is, it's like as good of a deal as one can get. So we do need these sponsors. And look, I'm thankful that there have been people in all these markets who've like basically pretty much all of our funders are always like, we've never done something like this before, but we really like you. This feels different and we want to do it. And then they champion us to the market. That's like pretty much how it's like always worked. Um, and for a while there, the kind of narrative change of like the way that those cities were growing, that was like enough of a like a KPI for them. But then, over time, and especially like post COVID and some budgets kind of shrank back and the economy's been a bit rocky, for these secondary and tertiary cities that are like pretty stalled on population growth. At the end of the day, the big stakeholders that like would fund groups like us, One, they just need more butts and seats. They need people moving there and paying taxes. Like they need taxes for city services. Like if we could show that we could do that, that would really help. But of course, we're bringing together people who don't want to leave the places they are because they're important to those cities. So that started to, in the past years to get like a little tricky as trends have changed. I would say in the current moment we are in right now, some of the legacy institutional foundations are in a place that they say is akin to COVID, which is the feds obviously cutting all sorts of funding to nonprofits across the board has been existential for some of their favorite groups, like, ability to stay afloat. So a lot of the foundations are having to give way over, which means they can't give any new grants out to orgs that they're not already giving to. So that creates a little bit of a sticking point. But, right now, we're doing this event in New York City that's just for New Yorkers. We're in partnership with an indigenous foundation who's actually an early breaker in Oahu for a really exciting immersion that's going to be all around economic independence and decolonized practices. And then we're working on something, as I mentioned, in Pittsburgh with actually a community member of ours who runs an impact studio. And it's all going to be around like tech enabled, like ideas for the public good. And then lastly, we're working with a group that does a lot of urban planning and economic development, and we're looking at building out something for them. So in each one of these situations, we're building things that, of course, are still place-based experiences, but they're like slightly more focused. Like the New York one, our funder said, hey, we love what you're doing, but it needs to be just New Yorkers. And because there's not a place-based experience right now in New York City, we deserve one. As funders, we actually want more pipeline. As our grantees, we want them to have more exposure to funding. And like, we also know this, this is a city, but it's enormous. And from borough to borough, neighbor to neighborhood, we don't know one another, right? So for them, it's very easy to see how year over year this could grow. Same thing with the other ones. It like fits into the bucket of exactly what they want to do. So I think our legacy event will continue to happen, but it's not going to continue as often because it's just a little bit trickier for funders to understand what they exactly get from it outside of the professional development and kind of narrative, amplification of their city.
It's interesting. So if I'm someone
Yeah.
who's embarking on a purpose-led path and say, I believe that my purpose is building community, what is your sage advice?
Well, with events first of all, I always ask people when I get introduced to people trying to do community events, I'm like, why do you want to do this? Do you really want to do this? It's a hardness. You should really be excited. Like for me, like Anthony Bourdain is probably one of my favorite humans of all time. I've always loved exploring. I love eating my way through cities and listening to the music that connect it. Like, I have a million and one Anthony Bourdain-esque sit downs over food with people in like the most unlikely places all across the country. And that feeds my soul when I'm also trying to like do all the harder things that we do, right? The event businesses that do the best are and even purpose driven, but like once again, I love that we're sector agnostic, and I think it's one of the most beautiful things possible. I also think that people who care about just the soul of our nation and are spending kind of politically should be thinking about groups like us that aren't political but still bring people together differently. And I think it's almost a miss that they don't, but that's a whole other side conversation. But it is just much simpler when you aren't as broad as we've been. You just have to be a little bit more narrow to a specific issue or topic that people are trying to solve. You still have to look at it as, an entrepreneur, like people building a business and going to raise money, like what problem are you solving? And like, it has to be at the end of the day, especially if some of your money is coming, some mix is coming from philanthropy, they don't move fast. They never will move fast. So you have to figure out like, you can't really fully rely on them as being your main partners because they will disappear. And what else can you be doing? So on the event side, I definitely think once again, like having something that's like super tactical to a specific, like, like workforce development's an issue in every single city. Everyone's trying to figure out, especially with the AI revolution, there's so much money being poured into that and will continue to be poured into that because we constantly have to figure out how to upskill labor that's not active in the workforce. If someone were to do something around that, might not be sexy, but if it's something that like resonates directly to you, there's a lot of dollars and a lot of pain points and a lot of things to like go into that. People who are creating things for like specific groups of, whether it's certain things that are women led or for, for Jewish Americans or Muslim Americans, whatever it is, those are great in the sense that like people who attend them are looking for more community and more and that identity of that community and people understand them. That's a pain point for them as attendees that they're looking for more of. And that speaks to people because you still need people to buy tickets faster and with more willingness, or of course, people doing things on a religious basis. So I do think there's this hierarchy of things. And then, look, if it's not purposeful, obviously doing anything that makes people more money always will sell. But
No, I know we're talking purpose led, but
yeah, yeah.
that's very helpful advice. I actually think it's really helpful. I understand the inclination to be more broad because I'm just more of a curious person and a lot of what I do is broader. But it is a lot. If you are someone who can drum the same beat ad nauseum, you can build such a huge market and business because it's a lot easier for people to digest. And it's something I'm working through now and how to like clarify messaging and get super, super clear because it is hard when your container is wider to have people really understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah. I mean, look, the way people have come together to our events, I think is a little bit complicated, but at the end of the day, people, when they think of Breakout for business opportunities, think of us as city experts, right? Like that is what is our unique, defining quality. That's why when certain brands or certain companies or certain nonprofits are trying to do something, especially if it's in multiple cities, like we're working with a group and activating in a few different cities for them, like across the country right now. And I'm working on some of the things with them. And I'm like, there's a lot of event planners out there that they could hire, but the event planner would have no idea. Like, it's one thing to create staging and pipe and drape and all this stuff, but like
Totally.
we're navigating topics and communities and we have trusted people in these places that we can text with. That is like, and that's only been built up because we have this niche expertise that we've fostered over a decade. It would be very hard I've seen people try to do stuff that sounds like Breakout over the years. And what they always end up doing is they have few cool enough friends and they'll like pop up like a dinner for one night in one place and some brand will throw them money because they knew someone there. And it's such a flash in the pan. Like
Yeah.
you have to just continuously show up over and over and over again and keep providing people value. And yeah, I think it's all about the niches and being really clear about what your specialty is.
This was really awesome. I feel like I learned even more. So thank you for taking the time. And I hope we've inspired some people in giving them some tools to support them on their community-led journey.
Love it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. If you do like listening, it would mean the world to us if you could subscribe or review the podcast anywhere that you watch or listen to the podcast. It really helps with the algorithm to share this with the world. I want to give a special thank you to young Spielberg and Sarah Yarkin for their beautiful work on our opening jingle, Dana Boulos for her help with the beautiful art, and to all of you for tuning in and keeping this dream alive. If you want to hear certain topics or from certain guests, please feel free to email us. We really, really want to hear from you and see how we can best support you. See you next time.